Hello everybody and welcome. Today we will talk about Volkswagen Emissions Scandal. This is a case that you might have heard over the last 5 to 6 years, talked about quite a bit, at least here in the United States, but also they're likely to face similar challenges perhaps in other countries as well. The case highlights the Volkswagen Emissions Scandal, a case so notorious because of the German company purposely deceiving government officials. In 2017, VW pled guilty to 3 criminal felony charges in the United States that included defrauding the U.S. government, violating environmental regulations, obstructing justice, engaging in wire fraud, and violating import regulations. It agreed to pay $2.8 billion in criminal charges, which is only a small portion of the total cost it will have to pay to resolve this scheme. So being involved in illegal activities against governments is very, very costly and can make companies go bankrupt. Until recently, Volkswagen was known for its very strong reputation for sustainability. It became the first car manufacturer to adopt the ISO 14001 principles, international environmental principles that act as standards for global firms. The company also adopted a number of sustainability goals in 2002, at a time before sustainability actually became a hot topic in our environment. Volkswagen began investing in vehicles that would reduce carbon emissions early, including electric and diesel vehicles. In 2014, Volkswagen introduced the VW XL1, which they claimed to be the most fuel-efficient car in the world at that time. Of course, later on, their scandal showed just how misleading these claims really were. The scandal involved Volkswagen's diesel vehicles, which it claimed were more environmentally friendly. During lab testing, the vehicles released fewer emissions, satisfying the regulators and the inspectors. What they did not know was that Volkswagen had installed defeat devices that could detect whenever the vehicle was undergoing emissions testing. During the test, the vehicle would run below performance, thereby giving off more emissions. On the road, however, these vehicles ran at maximum performance and gave off 40 times the allowable limit of emissions in the United States. Think about how deceiving that is, that you program your cars to be aligned with the law, but then in reality, it is 40 times worse. That is a huge problem, to be doing this intentionally and purposely. Why would company officials and executives get involved in this type of unethical behavior? Of course, this is where temptations and pressure to produce and increase higher profits tend to weigh heavily in the decision-making of all managers. Therefore, we have to be very careful and make sure our goals are reasonable. Just because we have a competitive industry does not mean we need to resort to unethical and immoral and illegal behaviors. European testers noticed that these vehicles did not perform as well on emission tests on the road as they did in the lab. So they asked the American testers to perform similar tests in the United States, which has some of the highest emission laws in the world. Using a portable emission system measurement device on the road to detect the emissions, the testers obtained scientific proof that the emissions given off on the road were not nearly as low as those given off during lab testing. VW admitted to installing defeat devices in its diesel vehicles to fool testers and regulators. A whistleblower at the Volkswagen company came forward and stated that VW immediately began destroying documents that could implicate the company. Their CEO resigned. The company agreed to pay 17.5 billion American dollars to compensate consumers that were affected by the defeat devices, which included retrofitting and buying back impacted vehicles. Those who knew about or were responsible for the defeat devices installation could face jail time. 6 executives and employees have been indicted for knowing about the conspiracy. Charges were also filed against German parts supplier as it designed the defeat devices and seemed to know that Volkswagen was using them to violate the laws. In total, criminal and civil fines and settlements were estimated to cost the company $22 billion just in the United States. However, truly restoring the company's reputation will require Volkswagen to incorporate ethics and appropriate practices into the organization's culture from the inside out, something that was severely lacking in the company's corporate culture prior to this scandal. What is most surprising about this scandal is the blatant use of deception to deceive consumers, governments, and testers. So I really and truly hope that you can learn from this Volkswagen case how deeply a firm can fall into an ethical scandal once it begins compromising its principles and substituting short-term results over long-term longevity and sustainability, and obviously the climate that we're all concerned about. As usual, when you're doing research, my recommendation is that you rely more and more on academic journal articles that have been written for supporting your thoughts or trying to discover the views from multiple authors' perspectives. So in this article that was published in the Global Journal of Research in Business and Management during 2016, in volume number 4, in issue number 2, it is entitled Volkswagen Emissions Scandal, a Global Case Study of Legal, Ethical, and Practical Consequences in Recommendations for Sustainable Management. So this article could be useful in finding out more research about what the company did, how they avoided, obviously, the law, and the eventual discovery of their deception and the overall cost that their shareholders had to endure, and their reputation obviously being damaged for the long term. As a summary, let me go ahead and post some questions and see what the results might be or some views might be regarding these questions. Explain how the culture of Volkswagen created this ethical scandal. Well, Volkswagen clearly had a very toxic organizational culture that placed short-term gains over long-term profitability. Since several executives knew of the defeat devices, it is clear that this culture of short-term results was spread throughout the organization. In this particular case, Volkswagen blatantly engaged in illegal behavior with the sole purpose to deceive testers, to deceive regulators, and to deceive consumers who were driving those cars. Concern over consumer rights appeared to be non-existent at the firm. The widespread extent of the scandal seems to indicate the firm had little scruples in engaging in illegal activities. The company took a very short-term attitude. It did not seem to consider the serious repercussions it would face should it be caught. For many Volkswagen employees, it all depended on building the company's reputation and gaining market share, even if it meant committing outright fraud to do so. Without a serious change in the company's culture, the firm will likely continue losing market share and may not survive. However, Volkswagen is a big company, and I'm sure their leaders and shareholders and employees will make the right decision to make up for this huge mistake and ethical lapse and begin recovering their brand image. While Volkswagen claimed to support ethics and sustainability, how can they recover from this ethical disaster? Probably the best way for the company to recover from this disaster is to prove that its culture has changed. It must take steps to demonstrate that it is fully embracing an ethical orientation and that misconduct of any sort will not be tolerated, no matter if the misconduct is committed by an employee, a lower level individual manager, or a senior executive. The first step is accepting responsibility for the disaster and trying to make amends with consumers and governments. The fact that they agree that they were purposely deceiving the governments and consumers, that means they're taking responsibility, and obviously it's costing them a huge amount of money from their bottom line profits. It will not be enough for Volkswagen to claim it is ethical or sustainable because stakeholders now know that they cannot trust the company's claims. Volkswagen will likely have to go above and beyond other car makers in adopting sustainability practices. Any future sustainable technology it adopts will need to be proven beyond a doubt over and over again. It will likely have to make greater investments in advertising, sustainable technology, mechanisms within the corporate culture to deter unethical conduct, in testing to prove that its claims are truthful to the outsiders. Do you believe this scandal will lead to tougher scrutiny of companies' environmental claims in the future? Why or why not? Of course, your answer and my answer might vary. However, we can say that most likely it will lead to some distrust of environmental claims of automobile companies in general, at least in the short term, as others might have been involved in the same tactics that Volkswagen used. To ensure that governments are not fooled again, regulators and testers are likely to spend much more time verifying vehicles' environmental claims. This may require greater investment on the part of the automakers. A scandal like this could prompt regulators to increase environmental regulations in every single country, which could place automakers at a very huge disadvantage since it must then invest in more sustainable technology. At the very least, consumers are more likely to want verifiable proof about the sustainability of the products that they purchase from these companies. In other words, consumers will say, "Show me proof." They will no longer put as much trust in companies, even if they're reputable companies like Volkswagen, prior to this scandal. What is interesting is that today we're living in an environment that is very global. So when a company does take part in a misconduct, it is likely to impact their overall profits across the globe. It's likely to impact their brand name and their brand strategy everywhere across the universe. I read this quotation or this statement that today we're living in an environment that is truly global. Why? Because your car is German, your vodka is Russian, your pizza is Italian, your kebab is Turkish, your democracy is Greek, your coffee is Brazilian, your movies are American or maybe Indian, your tea is Tamil, your shirt is Indian, your oil is Saudi Arabian, your electronics are Chinese, your numbers are Arabic, your letters are Latin. And you complain that your neighbor is an immigrant. Pull yourself together, man. Don't complain about globalization because we're benefiting from globalization. So if you have neighbors who look very different from you and are from different cultures, be thankful, learn from them, work together to create a better environment for all. It is good to be diverse. And while we're talking about the subject of cars, everywhere you go, stop texting. Be safe. And remember that ethical behavior is a skill. So police evaluate and improve your ethical standards and your ethical muscles by thinking critically. Just because a company says they will do something does not mean that they actually do it. So what they promise and how they behave might be different. That's where your job comes in, to critically evaluate and assess what they promise versus how they behave in the communities where they operate. Good luck.